Hey everyone, what up? Matt Kaiser here. Now it's been a while since I talked about the Final Fantasy IX Remake. Ever since I did my video with Crimsonrosso, where we sat down and talked about our potential hopes and wants for Final Fantasy IX Remake. But ever since that video, I felt like I've neglected some things that, in my sense, are equally as important as those other things. So I thought, why not make another video following up from that, while I list down my 3 additional hopes for Final Fantasy IX Remake. But before we begin, if you like what you're seeing here, then by all means, like the video, click the subscribe button if you're new, and hit that bell notification icon if you want more RPG content from yours truly. Not only that, but I'm currently playing in the middle of Persona 5 Royal, and hopefully before this year ends, I'll be able to deliver my long-awaited 750 subscriber special of Persona 5 Royal. So please do look forward to that as you can. That said, I'm going to list down 3 additional hopes, starting off with number 1. My first pick would have to be having the right development team. Now, let's just assume that Final Fantasy IX Remake has been in development for quite a while now, ever since we heard about it since the whole, NVIDIA leak around 2021. And we can only assume that this game has been cooking for quite a while now. Now that still begs the question on who exactly is making it. Now some people have theorized that this game is either internally developed by Square Enix or outsourced, or maybe even outsourced but then changed in-house by Square Enix. And many people think it's either Creative Studio 1 that's doing it, or Creative Studio 3, though Yoshi P from Creative Studio 3 has confirmed that he's not working on the Final Fantasy IX Remake. Now, speculation aside, my hope for Final Fantasy IX Remake is that they have the right team to do it. And I would also hope that they would even bring the original key stuff that worked on the original Final Fantasy IX. Since Square Enix do like to bring many key stuff that worked on, say, a source material when doing, like, say, the remakes or remasters. And 2 that come to my mind that are still active within Square Enix are Toshiki Itahana and Hiroki Ito, the former of which is a character designer for Final Fantasy IX, and currently, as we know, he has been working on a new project ever since we heard about it in 2022, though we don't know what that project is. All we know is that around his stuff from his office, as you can see from this vlog here, that he has some Final Fantasy IX related stuff, and he's been doing some Final Fantasy IX artwork. So I do think that he might be involved with a Final Fantasy IX remake, especially help with the graphics and visuals of the remake. And the latter, who I mentioned, that being Hiroki Ito, he's the director of Final Fantasy IX as well as Final Fantasy XII, and he even created the active time battle system that was used for both Final Fantasy IV, V, VI, VII, VIII, and IX. And his recent contribution to Square Enix would have to be when he directed a brand new game called Dungeon Encounters back in 2021, though many have slept on it mainly due to the fact that, well, visually, it didn't look that appealing, though from what I've heard for those who actually played it, it's actually pretty solid. So I imagine those 2 on board will be a good step in the right direction when developing a Final Fantasy IX Remake. I would also assume that they would also get approval from Hinobu Sakaguchi, who recently came back to Square Enix to help remaster one of his older titles, that being Fantasia Neo Dimension. I would also throw in a hopium or copium, if you will, that maybe Nobuo Uematsu himself might be involved with the game's soundtrack, as Final Fantasy IX is one of his favorite soundtracks he has ever worked on, and I would imagine he would at least help to contribute to it, though we heard in reports that he currently doesn't have it in him to do a full-on game soundtrack anymore, but who knows, he could have done it while this game was still in development and before he announced the whole he doesn't have that much in him. But let's only can assume and hope. But alas, my hope is that Final Fantasy IX Remake has the right team to do the game justice, especially if they bring some of the original key stuff that worked on the original for some really good direction. Number 2. multi-platform. Now, Final Fantasy has been a recent, sticky situation as of sorts, as we've seen that recent mainline games like say Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth haven't performed well even by Square Enix's expectations. Now, you can point to a number of multiple things of why that is. The one aspect that definitely comes to my mind would have to be that those two games were those two games were locked to PlayStation 5 only, a system in of itself that doesn't have much of an install base compared to say the PlayStation 4, and especially the Nintendo Switch. And given the fact that while Final Fantasy XVI has sold like 3 million and we still don't know the full-on sales numbers of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that does point to the fact that maybe locking it into Sony wasn't always the best call. Now for Final Fantasy IX Remake, especially given the fact that I don't think it's going to be on the same level as say Final Fantasy VII Remake, I don't see any point of them locking it to Sony consoles, as I do think I can see it being on multiple platforms, that being of course PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and Nintendo Switch 2 maybe, all day one, so anyone who has those consoles or systems can buy it immediately day one, and I think that's the great call, especially when you look at the report that Square Enix are aggressively pursuing multi-platform for their future games, including AAA, so I do think that having more multiple consoles for Final Fantasy IX to be on would be an absolute treat in my opinion. And this will not only help for veterans who have any of those systems, but especially to newcomers. That aspect is also important as we direct on to my final hopes and predictions for Final Fantasy IX Remake. And my final hope and prediction would have to be the Final Fantasy IX cartoon. Now this is a little bit unrelated to Final Fantasy IX Remake, but in a way it's sort of beneficial, as in a way this was the whole starting point with the whole debate over Final Fantasy IX Remake before the whole Nvidia leak thing. Now Final Fantasy IX cartoon, the animated series, was announced back in 2021, which conveniently was the same time that Final Fantasy IX Remake was leaked, and it was being headed by a French animated studio called Cybergroup Studios. Now, ever since that, we haven't seen what the whole cartoon series will look like even. All we know is that this series is aimed to 8 to 13-year-olds, as well as fans of the games themselves, including myself even, and well, we just really need to see it sometime soon. Now obviously we have our own theories that they're saving this project to line up with Final Fantasy IX Remake, as that would be a really good call, especially for a business perspective. But what I really hope is that this Final Fantasy IX cartoon really does well. Now we've reached a point where most video game adaptations have really done well, both as standalone projects, but both as projects that are companion pieces to the games that they are referring to. We've seen successes like Cyberpunk Edgerunners, Arcane, the Fallout show, the Sonic movies, and the Mario movie, all of them doing so well that a lot of the games that they are based upon have generated a way bigger project, mainly due to the success of those projects garnering new fans, which I think is very important, especially for a Final Fantasy IX cartoon. Now this is going to be a bit tricky, as trying to adapt a 40-hour plus JRPG into a television format is going to be tricky, depending if it's either 12 to 24 episodes. I mean, especially since nowadays lots of episodes on shows are getting a little bit more shorter nowadays, and mainly just crammed in with like hours of content, so it's really tough to say. But I do hope that with this Final Fantasy IX cartoon, it really does well, not only as an adaptation of the source material, but also a good enough push to help Final Fantasy IX Remake even flourish more, outside of it being possibly a good remake and being multi-platform and all that good stuff that people want. But that's my predictions. we're still currently in the know of waiting for potential Final Fantasy IX Remake, especially with more rumors and leaks popping up, and given the fact that we're currently at an age where now we don't have a big full-on Final Fantasy project to look forward to in the next year, I would doubtly assume that Final Fantasy IX Remake is the shining hope for that sense. But that will be my picks. Let me know down in the comments of what your picks guys are. And please check out my other video with Crimsonrosso where we list down more predictions and the hopes for Final Fantasy IX Remake. So until then, Mad Kaiser out.